Who Moved My Cheese is a story about mice and men and how little creatures can teach us something fundamental about business and life. G'day, are you seeking to be a high-performance CEO or learn about personal leadership and be a CEO of your own life? Then you've come to the right place because we share real experiences from CEOs for you to learn from. And so you don't miss out, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on all notifications. Let's get into it. Some years ago, I was in the middle of a midlife crisis. I'd had a successful career, and you might say on the up, since I'd graduated college, but then all of a sudden things took a turn. I was fully mortgaged up, I had a family to support and kids of my own. Up until then, I'd been successful in many roles and really grown into many roles. I'd been overseas and then I'd been supported by a tech company from the United States. However, when they sold off the division that I was in, I was left isolated and there was no role for me. I quickly picked up another role, but within less than 12 months, that position had become untenable due to the internal politics. So I was interested in consulting, so I took on a role as a consultant for someone that I knew. But unfortunately, that also became untenable when it was revealed to me that he didn't have the work for me and he didn't have the revenues to support me. It was at that point I realized things were pretty grim. I went to him about the problem, and he was wise enough to give me access to a book which I read in that afternoon. And that book was Who Stole My Cheese? And it changed my outlook on life forever. If you want to read the book, I'll leave a link in the description. You can get it on all the regular outlets. But here's a brief summary. There are 4 main characters. 2 mice called Sniff and Scurry, and 2 men called Ham and Haw. And they both have similar lives to begin with. They go from their homes into a maze, they find the cheese that is there, they eat the cheese and they return home. And they do this day after day, and this sustains them. This is all they need to do in their lives. Go from their home, through the maze, to the same location to get the cheese. The mice just eat the cheese and return home and go on with their lives. The men, of course, see it as more than that. They see that they found the cheese, it's their cheese, they own it, they decorate the area, they enjoy it, and they feel entitled to it. Then one day, out of the blue, the cheese is no longer there. There's no warning, there's no indication of where the cheese has gone, it's just not there. Now the mice react almost instantly. There's no attachment to that particular location, so they move on back through the maze, and although it takes them some time and they have to seek it, they eventually find new cheese. The little men react very differently. The cheese has always been there, they're entitled to it, they've decorated the house. Where is the cheese? Surely the cheese will return, and they return day after day after day. And things become very desperate because they have no other resources to draw on. It's that cheese or nothing, and they go hungry and they suffer. But they can't get out of the fear and the sense that they should be entitled to the cheese. And this goes on until things are so desperate that eventually Haw says, I have to go and overcome my fear. He laughs at himself, at his silly fears, and he goes out into the maze. The maze is dark. It's frightening. He doesn't know what's around every corner, and sometimes he wonders whether he's going to get back. And he doesn't find cheese for a while, but he keeps looking. He doesn't give up. And eventually he finds a small amount of cheese. It's not as nice as the old cheese that he had, but it sustains him. But rather than just staying there and hoping that more cheese will come, he realizes that there is probably better cheese out there and to keep looking, and perhaps this cheese will be gone too. And he goes searching for more cheese, coming back, and sometimes he's finding cheese where that new cheese was, and sometimes he doesn't. But he keeps searching, and eventually he finds more cheese, enough to bring back to his other man, Ham, and feed him, and try and convince Ham to come out. But he doesn't. Ham is so stuck by his fear and his entitlement and his comforts that he can't move. He's paralyzed. Haw, however, goes on to find more cheese, despite all the difficulties, and becomes sustainable in a new way of looking at the world. The story represents 2 paradigms. It's the mice and their simplicity, their basic needs for survival, they're reacting to the situation and moving through that just to survive in a simple reactive manner. The men are far more complex. They build patterns, they build behaviors, they build entitlements and belief systems. And these create fears and resistances to change. And it's this difference that sometimes needs to be embraced. So how did reading that book change my life? Well, I eventually found another role. It wasn't one that I wanted. It wasn't the direction that I was going, but it sustained me. And it wasn't long before I was picked up for one of the best roles of my life, and that was a job with Qantas doing a $250 million program refitting 747s. And then from there I went on to do many, many other things. But one of the key things that I always do is I don't get settled in my career and my role. What I had to unlearn was the fact that I felt that I had been entitled to my career, that I had the education, I'd worked hard, I had got the grades, and I got the experience, and all those things entitled me to have a career. Well, that's just not the way the world was for me. So I had to reinvent that and go looking for new opportunities. And I did. I found new opportunities and new cheese. And to this day, I still do not rest on anything that I have done. It's always seeking to find something new, looking for new ways to build the business. And I've been successful in business now for over 12 years. Now you may be thinking, life isn't like a maze with cheese in it. But let's take that simple analogy and apply it to some of the things that have happened over the last 20 or 30 years that you've probably witnessed yourself. In the 90s, the internet came along, and traditional businesses like newspapers and magazines and those sorts of things quickly came onto struggled times. If they didn't pivot over to the internet, they were going to miss out. And some of the winners that we know today are people like Amazon that were so successful in replacing that retail store with an online store. That was the 90s. As we went into the 2000s, the mobile phone generation, of which I was very much a part of, this displaced some key industries, including payphones, which you just don't see anymore. The cable providers, pages, all of those industries were closed, and the Nokias, the Googles, the Samsungs have become successful off the back of that. Fast forward now to 2007, the emergence of smartphones, particularly Apple and Google and Samsung, they really took the lunch or the cheese away from Nokia. They were such a great mobile phone company that couldn't move on to smartphones and completely collapsed. Smartphones now ubiquitous, certainly a big player out there. The next one, 2010s, cloud computing. Back in the day, there used to be offices set up with server rooms. That's for internal use within your own office, or for a local resource that you would get server access to. Now, these servers are literally global data farms, with cloud compute being one of the biggest elements to that. And who's another big player in there? Well, Amazon again. And the final one I'm going to talk about now is the streaming services, which we all use. This is the YouTubes and Netflix, and again, the Amazon Prime, content providers pushing streaming services out, pretty much replacing the old TV, to some extent the old radio and these other services, which were part of everyone's lives from the mid-20th century right through until streaming services came in. So all these changes have really underlined the fact that industry and technology are moving forward, and we can't really rest on one pile of cheese or one industry or one technology or one way of doing business. We have to act and move forward. So what can you do to engender some of those MICE strategies? And the first big one, many things start here, within the mind or the mindset. And the first one to consider here is to detach yourself from the cheese. Not fall in love with your success, your way of doing business, put too much emotion into it, but constantly challenge it and see where you can move beyond it. Find new ways to invent new ways of doing business. The second major mindset is to see fear as a signal, not as a stop sign. So you want to train yourself and your team to see fear as a signal that there is growth ahead, that there is learning ahead, that there is something beyond that, and not to get bogged down in the fear, but to look beyond that and to move through that. The third mindset is to put curiosity over comfort. See the maze as something to learn about, not to be feared, and to go forward with a curious mindset, understanding the patterns of the maze, not isolating yourself and trying to surround yourself with comfort and security. The fourth mindset is to laugh at your fears, not to take yourself too seriously. Just as Hoare did, he was fearful of the maze, he laughed at his own fears, and that helped him overcome those. So train yourself and your team to laugh at the changes and to embrace those changes and not take yourself too seriously. And the fifth mindset is to act before you are ready. You will never have perfect information. As a guide, if you've got 70% of the information, it's time to act. If you wait for perfect information, it will never be there and it will cause hesitation and you won't act. Now here's a couple of real actionable things as a CEO that you can do. Every quarter, run a cheese session where you're looking at the cash cows or the areas where you know you've got business and challenge those. Okay, how can we build off that? Challenge your team to build more ways of generating business beyond what you have already built there. Secondly, seek to kill a legacy project every year. So if it's not growing, if it's stagnant, look to kill it off because it is not a growing opportunity. Thirdly, fund 2 maze experiments. Some low budget experiments which test certain new ideas that could bring in more business or more innovation or more opportunities. Number 4, shadow a customer once a month, either by phone or in person, to really get to know them and see what their problems are. And this can uncover opportunities for you. And lastly, tie bonuses to adaptability, not just looking to steadily grow the business, but look for change and rewarding change and adaptability to move into new markets. I would like to relate another story which came to me through a friend of mine. He goes to casinos and he enjoys using the slot machines. And he's quite conservative and he has a budget. He manages it quite well. But next to him was someone who wasn't doing so well and was putting money into another slot machine at quite a high rate and was getting frustrated and was losing lots of money. He asked my friend to mind his machine because he had invested a lot into that machine whilst he went to get some more money from the cashier. When he came back, he expressed his dissatisfaction with his lack of winnings and he began to put more money in. And not only was he putting more money in, but actually bigger and bigger amounts, getting more and more frustrated with his machine. Meanwhile, my friend had been putting small amounts in, and as it turned out, he had a small win. And that really pushed this other fella over the end. And he slammed down on the machine and he said, "I've invested so much in this machine. This machine owes me. Why isn't it paying out?" And my friend turned to him and he's pretty blunt and he says, "Mate, this machine doesn't owe you shit." I really like this story because it summarizes how humans often behave. They build a story in their mind. They've invested something and they're expecting some return, even though reality that is not the case. I worked in the gambling industry. I know that you are always going to lose playing poker machines. If you put $100 in, you're going to lose that $100. There's just no way to win against the poker machines. They have a return on investment ratio, which means that the house always wins. So to say he's investing and expecting a win and to get his money back is a false paradigm. But we do this all the time. We hang on to something. We hang on to a pattern. We say, well, if I invest in a property, I'm going to get a return. If I invest in the poker machine, I'm going to get a return. And he set up this paradigm and was getting very, very frustrated that that wouldn't occur. And we do that all the time. So it's a human flaw we have, and it's something we need to be aware of and to try to move beyond. So in conclusion, I think what we can learn from the Who Moved My Cheese story is that there is a maze out there, a complex life to be explored. And we've got to resist the temptation of just isolating ourselves in a small area of comfort, because that area of comfort is more likely than not going to disappear, whether it be because of the markets that are moving or our situation. Things are changing all the time, and it's up to us to keep going and be curious and find more and more about the maze and learn more about, if you like, life, business, and stay curious. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the description below. If you have any ideas for new videos, please also let us know. We love making videos for our audience from their recommendations. And I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.